Indian billionaire sees homeless woman with her baby in the rain and hires her as a maid without thinking. He gave her the keys to his house. But when he returned home, he was left terrified. Welcome to Billionaires and Hearts. Before we dive into today's emotional journey, don't forget to subscribe and click the bell to stay updated. We'd love to hear your first impressions, so drop a comment below and let us know what you think as you watch. And if you enjoy our stories, please like and share this video with your friends. Now let's get started. Bharav Patel stared through the rain-streaked window of his luxury car, his mind far from the pressing business matters that usually consumed his thoughts. The monsoon season had brought Mumbai to a near standstill, with sheets of water cascading from leaden skies. As his driver navigated the flooded streets, something caught his eye. A figure huddled beneath a flimsy tarp near an abandoned building. He normally wouldn't have noticed. Years of accumulating wealth had taught him to look past the city's less fortunate residents, but tonight was different. Perhaps it was the way the figure clutched something protectively to their chest, or maybe it was the quiet desperation in their posture. "Stop the car," he commanded. His driver, Kamal, hesitated. "Sir?" "In this rain." I said, "Stop." The luxury vehicle came to a halt, and Bharav stepped out into the downpour, his Italian leather shoes immediately soaked. As he approached, he realized the figure was a woman, drenched to the bone, trying to shield an infant from the relentless rain. The woman looked up at him, and Bharav was struck by the quiet dignity in her eyes, despite her desperate circumstances. She didn't beg or plead. She simply held his gaze. "Size, what's your name?" he asked, having to raise his voice above the storm. "Meera," she replied, her voice barely audible. The baby in her arms whimpered softly. Without fully understanding why, Bharav made a decision that would change multiple lives forever. "Come with me." Meera hesitated, clutching her child closer. "You need shelter, and I have a position open for household staff. The choice is yours. But I'm offering you both a dry place to sleep and honest work." Perhaps it was desperation, or perhaps she saw something trustworthy in this well-dressed stranger. But Meera slowly stood up. Bharav led them to his car, ignoring Kamal's shocked expression as he opened the door for them. The drive to his mansion was silent, broken only by the occasional thunder and the baby's soft coos. Bharav found himself stealing glances at his unexpected passengers through the rearview mirror. Meera sat perfectly straight, her clothes dripping onto the leather seats, but her focus was entirely on keeping her child warm and comfortable. When they arrived at his estate, Bharav did something that would later be called either the most foolish or the most compassionate act of his life. He handed Meera a set of keys. "These are for the service entrance and the staff quarters. Get yourself and the little one dried off and settled. We'll discuss duties tomorrow." He paused and then added, "There's a kitchen in the staff wing. Help yourself to whatever you need." Meera took the keys with trembling hands, murmuring thanks. Bharav watched them disappear into the staff entrance before heading to his own wing of the mansion. He had a late business dinner to attend, and he was already running behind. "I'll be back in a few hours," he called to his head of security, Raj. "Keep an eye on things." It wasn't until much later, as he was driving home from his dinner meeting, that the full weight of what he'd done hit him. He'd given complete access to his home to a stranger from the streets. In his years of building his technology empire, he'd never made such an impulsive decision. His car pulled up to the mansion's gates, and an unfamiliar sense of dread began to creep over him. The security lights were off. The guard post was empty. Something was terribly wrong. Bharav's heart began to race as he punched in his security code with trembling fingers. As the gates swung open, he could see that the mansion was dark. Every light was out. His mind raced with possibilities, each worse than the last. What had he done? What had his moment of compassion cost him? He reached for his phone to call the police, but something made him hesitate. First, he needed to see for himself what was happening inside his home. As he approached the front door, he could hear something that made his blood run cold, multiple voices coming from inside his darkened mansion. Bharav stood frozen at his own threshold, the key in his hand, wondering what horror awaited him on the other side of the door. Bharav's hand trembled as he inserted the key into the lock. The voices inside had grown quieter, but he could still hear movement. Taking a deep breath, he pushed the door open, prepared for the worst. The entrance hall was pitch black. His fingers found the light switch, and what he saw made him stumble backward. His security team lay unconscious on the marble floor. Raj, his head of security, was slumped against the wall, but there was no blood, no signs of violence. They appeared to be sleeping. "Don't move." A woman's voice came from behind him. Not Meera's voice, and this one was older, harder. Bharav froze. "Who are you?" "Someone who's been watching your house for months." The woman stepped into view. She was dressed in black, her grey hair pulled back severely from her face. "My name is Indira, and we need to talk about the woman you brought home tonight." Before Bharav could respond, another figure emerged from the shadows, Meera. But she looked different now. Her posture was straight, confident. The helpless woman from the street was gone. "I suppose you want an explanation," Meera said softly, her baby still cradled in her arms. Bharav looked between the two women, his mind racing. "What have you done to my security team?" "They're only sleeping," Indira assured him. "A harmless sedative in their evening tea. They'll wake up with nothing worse than a headache." "Why?" Meera stepped forward. "Because we needed to talk to you without interference, and because we need your help." "My help?" Bharav almost laughed. "You break into my home, drug my staff, and then ask for my help." "We didn't break in," Meera reminded him gently. "You gave me the keys." Indira moved to turn on more lights, revealing more of the entrance hall. "Perhaps we should all sit down. This is a long story, and you'll want to hear it." Bharav considered making a run for it, but curiosity overcame his fear. Something about these women's calm demeanor told him that if they meant him harm, they would have already acted. He followed them to his own living room, where they settled into the expensive leather furniture. "First," Meera began, "you should know that meeting you tonight wasn't an accident. We've been trying to make contact with you for weeks." "Why not just request a meeting through my office?" Indira snorted. "Your gatekeepers are very good at their jobs. Too good. We needed to bypass them entirely. So you used my compassion against me," Bharav said bitterly. "No," Meera corrected. "We counted on your humanity." "There's a difference." The baby in Meera's arms began to fuss, and she rocked him gently. Bharav noticed how natural the movement was. Whatever else might be false about her, her care for the child was genuine. "This is about your company's new development project," Indira stated bluntly. "The one in the old textile district." Bharav stiffened. The project was his company's largest undertaking yet, a massive tech hub that would transform a declining industrial area into a modern business center. "What about it?" "You don't know what's really happening there, do you?" Meera asked. "What your project manager, Vikram, has been doing." "Vikram? He's one of my most trusted employees." Indira pulled out a tablet and handed it to him. "Look at these photos." What Bharav saw made his stomach turn. Images of unsafe working conditions, of workers being forced to handle hazardous materials without protection, of money changing hands in dark corners, all stamped with dates from the past few months. "This is impossible," he whispered. "We have safety protocols, inspections, all carefully staged when you visit," Meera explained. "Whereas the real work happens after hours, with undocumented workers who can't complain without risking deportation. And the profits from these cut corners," Indira added, "they're not going back into your company. Vikram has been building quite an impressive personal fortune." Bharav's mind raced back over the past few months, small inconsistencies he'd dismissed, reports that seemed too good to be true, Vikram's increasingly lavish lifestyle. "Why are you showing me this?" he demanded. "Who are you really?" Meera shifted her baby to her other arm. "I used to work in your company's accounting department under a different name. I noticed discrepancies in the project's books, but when I tried to report them, I was fired. When I kept investigating, I started receiving threats." "That's when she came to us," Indira continued. "I run a private investigative agency specializing in corporate corruption. We've been building a case, but we need your help to expose this without destroying your company in the process." Bharav stood up and walked to his window, looking out at the darkened grounds of his estate. The rain had stopped, but water still dripped from the trees, catching the light from the house. "If what you're showing me is true," he said slowly, Why this elaborate scheme? Why not just send me the evidence? Because we needed to know what kind of man you really are, Meera answered. Whether you were involved or just unaware. Whether you would help us make it right. And drugging my security staff. Was that really necessary? Indira shrugged. We needed to have this conversation without interruption. And we needed to know if your security protocols could be breached this easily. They can, by the way. You should fix that. The baby began to cry in earnest now, and Meera stood to pace with him. Bharav watched her, a question forming. The baby, is he really yours? Yes, Meera answered firmly. Everything about him is real, including the fact that I'm raising him alone because his father was one of the workers who died at your construction site 3 months ago. The death that was reported as an accident and quietly covered up. The words hit Bharav like a physical blow. He sank back into his chair, his mind spinning with implications. Years of building his company, of priding himself on his ethics and integrity, and all the while this had been happening under his nose. I need to see everything, he said finally. Every piece of evidence you have. Indira nodded approvingly. We can show you, but first, we need your word that you'll help us make this right. Not just by stopping Vikram, but by making sure the workers are properly compensated and their families taken care of. And we need to know you'll protect anyone who comes forward, Meera added. There are others besides me who can testify to what's been happening. Bharav looked at the sleeping baby, then at the photos still displayed on the tablet. The empire he'd built was tainted now, but perhaps it wasn't too late to restore its integrity. You have my word, he said quietly, but I have conditions of my own. My first condition, Bharav said, standing to face Meera and Indira, is complete honesty from this moment forward. No more deception, no more games. Indira nodded slowly. Fair enough. Second, he continued, we do this legally. No more drugging people or breaking in anywhere. If we're going to expose corruption, we do it cleanly. That could make things more difficult, Indira warned. I'm not finished. Bharav held up his hand. Third condition, Meera and her baby stay here, under my protection. If Vikram is as dangerous as you suggest, they need proper security. Meera started to protest, but Bharav cut her off. You used my compassion to get in here. Now you'll have to accept it genuinely. The security team began stirring in the entrance hall. Indira checked her watch. They're waking up earlier than expected. Strong constitution. Go, Bharav told her. Use the back entrance. Come back tomorrow through proper channels. I'll alert my staff to expect you. After Indira left, Bharav helped his groggy security team to their feet, explaining away their condition as possible food poisoning from their shared dinner. Once they were settled, he returned to find Meera still in the living room, her baby finally sleeping peacefully. You should know, she said quietly, my real name is Meera. That wasn't a lie. And my son's name is Dev. Bharav sat across from her. Tell me about his father. Meera's eyes filled with tears, but her voice remained steady. His name was Arun. He was a skilled electrician who couldn't find proper work because he lacked certain papers. Vikram's people recruited him, promised good pay and eventual documentation. She paused, collecting herself. The night he died, he was forced to work on live electrical systems without proper equipment. The official report said he made a mistake, but Arun never made mistakes with electrical work, never. Why didn't you come to me directly? I tried. 3 times I attempted to schedule meetings. Each time, Vikram's people intercepted the request. After the 3rd try, the threat started. Pictures of me walking home, notes about how accidents can happen to anyone. She clutched Dev closer. That's when I went looking for help and found Indira. Bharav rubbed his temples, feeling a headache building. How deep does this go in my company? Vikram has at least 6 senior managers involved, possibly more. They're skimming money from multiple projects, not just the tech hub. The unsafe conditions and undocumented workers are just part of it. A knock at the door made them both jump. It was Raj, still looking slightly unsteady. Sir, we've completed a security sweep of the grounds. Everything appears normal now. Should we call the police about the incident? Bharav glanced at Meera before responding. No, Raj, but I want you to double the security detail for the foreseeable future. And this woman and her child are now under our protection. They'll be staying in the family wing, not the staff quarters. Raj's expression remained professional, but his eyebrows rose slightly. Of course, sir. Shall I have someone prepare a suite? After Raj left, Meera turned to Bharav. The family wing, that wasn't part of our discussion. The staff quarters are too easily accessed. If you're going to be safe here, you need to be closer. He stood, straightening his jacket. We should get some rest. Tomorrow will be a long day. But rest proved elusive for Bharav. He spent hours in his study, reviewing project reports with new eyes, seeing the subtle discrepancies he'd missed before. Around dawn, he heard Dev crying and found himself walking to their suite. He found Meera pacing the room, trying to soothe the fussy baby. She looked exhausted. "I'm sorry," she said, seeing him in the doorway. "Did we wake you?" "I was already awake. May I?" He held out his arms for Dev. Meera hesitated only briefly before handing him the baby. To both their surprise, Dev settled almost immediately in Bharav's arms. "You're good with him," Meera observed. "I had a son once," Bharav said quietly, the words surprising even himself. He never spoke about this. "He and my wife died in a car accident long ago. After that, I threw myself into building the company." "I'm sorry," Meera whispered. "I didn't know." "Very few people do." He gently rocked Dev, who was drifting back to sleep. "Perhaps that's why I missed what was happening. I became too removed, too focused on growth and profits." "You can't blame yourself for Vikram's choices." "No, but I can take responsibility for my negligence." He placed the sleeping Dev in his crib. "Get some rest, Meera. So I'll have breakfast sent up in a few hours." As he turned to leave, Meera called after him softly, "Bharav, thank you. Not just for helping us, but for showing me I was wrong about you." He paused in the doorway. "How so?" "I thought you were just another rich man who occasionally played at charity. But you're not playing, are you? You genuinely care." "Caring is dangerous in business," he replied. "Fair, but perhaps that's exactly what my company needs right now." Later that morning, as Bharav prepared for his day, his phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. His blood ran cold as he read it. "You're harboring a troublemaker, sir. Accidents can happen to anyone, even billionaires in their own homes. Think carefully about your next move." He immediately called Raj to strengthen security further, but his mind was already racing ahead. They would need to move faster than planned. Vikram clearly had eyes inside the mansion, which meant their time was running out. When Indira arrived for their meeting, she found Bharav in his study with Meera, Dev sleeping nearby in a bassinet. The morning light streamed through tall windows, but it did little to soften the tension in the room. "We have a problem," Bharav announced, showing them the threatening message. Indira examined it carefully. "This changes things. We can't wait to build a perfect case anymore." "No," Bharav agreed. "We need to act now." He turned to his computer and pulled up several files. "I've been up all night reviewing our options. I think I know how we can trap Vikram, but it's risky." "Very risky." Meera stepped closer, Dev stirring in his sleep behind her. "What kind of risk are we talking about?" "The kind that could cost me my company," Bharav said grimly. "But if we succeed, we don't just stop Vikram. We make sure nothing like this can ever happen in my company again." As he outlined his plan, none of them noticed the small red light blinking under his desk, a listening device planted long before any of them had entered the room. In his office across town, Vikram was hearing every word, and his face twisted into a cold smile as he began making calls of his own. The game was about to change dramatically for everyone involved. Vikram leaned back in his leather chair, a satisfied smile playing on his lips as he listened to the conversation through the bug in Bharav's study. His fingers drummed rhythmically on his desk while his other hand held his phone to his ear. "Are you hearing this?" he asked the person on the line. "Our noble CEO thinks he can outsmart us." He paused, listening to the response. "No, let them proceed with their little plan. In fact, let's help them along." Meanwhile, back at the mansion, Bharav was outlining his strategy. "The annual shareholders' meeting is approaching. Vikram will expect us to make our move there, so that's exactly what we won't do." What do you mean? Meera asked, adjusting Dev's blanket as he slept. We're going to let him think he's won, Bharav explained. I'm going to start acting erratic, making mistakes. Small ones at first, then bigger ones. Let him think the pressure is getting to me. Indira frowned. That's dangerous. If you appear weak, he might decide to strike first. I'm counting on it, Bharav replied, because while he's focused on me, you'll be meeting with the one person he fears most, his wife. Meera's eyes widened. Priya, what does she have to do with this? Everything, Bharav said quietly, because she's been keeping records of her own. She approached me privately months ago with suspicions about her husband's activities, but I foolishly dismissed her concerns. Now it's time to rectify that mistake. As they discussed the details, Vikram continued listening, his smile growing wider. He pressed a button on his desk intercom. Send her in. The door opened, and a woman entered, the same woman who had served tea to Bharav's security team the night before. She was wearing a housekeeping uniform, but her bearing suggested military training. You've done well, Vikram told her. Continue monitoring the mansion staff. I want to know everything. But even Vikram couldn't monitor everything. In a small cafe across town, Priya sat with her hands wrapped around a coffee cup that had long gone cold. Across from her, a man in a rumpled suit placed a thick envelope on the table. Everything you asked for, he said quietly. Bank records and offshore accounts, all of it. But be careful, Priya. Your husband has eyes everywhere. Not everywhere, she replied, her voice barely a whisper. Not anymore. Back at the mansion, Bharav's plan was taking shape. He deliberately fumbled a major contract negotiation, letting rumors spread about his mental state. He began arriving late to meetings, something he'd never done before. To all appearances, he was a man cracking under pressure. Meera watched this performance with growing concern. One evening, after putting Dev to bed, she found Bharav in his study, staring out the window. You're putting yourself at risk, she said softly. He turned to face her, and she was struck by how tired he looked. Sometimes we have to risk everything to make things right. Is that what this is about? Making things right? Isn't that enough? Meera stepped closer. I think it's about more than that. I think you're punishing yourself for not seeing what was happening in your company. Bharav was quiet for a long moment. When I built this company, I had principles. Somewhere along the way, I stopped paying attention. People died because of that negligence. People died because of Vikram's greed, she corrected firmly. And who promoted him? Who gave him power and looked the other way? Bharav's voice cracked slightly. Your husband wasn't the only one, Meera. There were others before him. I just never knew because I didn't want to know. The weight of his words hung in the air between them. Finally, Meera spoke again. Dev smiles when he hears your voice. Did you know that? Even before he sees you, he knows your footsteps. He trusts you instinctively. Children often trust those they shouldn't. No, she shook her head. Children see truth that adults often miss. You're not the man you think you are, Bharav. You're better than that. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent knock. Raj entered it, his face grave. Sir, there's been a breach in the company's main server. Someone is downloading massive amounts of data. Bharav's eyes widened. The backup files. Already compromised, Raj confirmed. And sir, they're focusing on Project Sunrise. Project Sunrise, the secret initiative Bharav had started after learning about the worker abuses, a complete overhaul of company safety protocols, worker benefits, and whistleblower protections. If that information got out too soon. He's making his move, Meera realized. No, Bharav corrected. He's forcing ours. He turned to Raj. Get Indira on the phone. Then call Priya, tell her it's time. Time for what? Meera asked. Time to stop playing defense. Bharav's voice was steel. Vikram thinks he knows my next move. Let's show him how wrong he is. But even as he spoke across the city, other pieces were moving into place. Vikram's spy in the mansion was sending him hourly updates. Priya was meeting with her lawyer, and in a small, secure room, Indira was reviewing security footage that would change everything. Footage that showed the true events of the night Arun died. The game was reaching its climax, but no one could predict who would survive the final moves. In his office, Vikram was making his own preparations. He opened his safe and removed a small USB drive, his insurance policy. On it was evidence that could destroy not just Bharav, but half the business elite in Mumbai. He had spent years collecting dirt on everyone, preparing for just such a moment. What he didn't know was that at that exact moment, his wife Priya was in a taxi heading toward Bharav's mansion, her own set of files clutched tightly to her chest, files that would prove to be far more damaging than anything her husband had collected. As night fell over the city, all the players were moving into position for what would prove to be the most dangerous phase of their game. And somewhere in Bharav's mansion, baby Dev slept peacefully, unaware that his future hung in the balance of the coming hours. The mansion's security system registered Priya's arrival with a soft chime. She stepped into the foyer, her elegant sari at odds with the tension in her shoulders. Raj escorted her directly to Bharav's study, where Meera and Indira were already waiting. "He's making his final moves," Priya announced without preamble, placing her files on Bharav's desk. "Vikram has called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. He's planning to present evidence of your instability and force a vote of no confidence." Bharav nodded, unsurprised. "And the real reason?" "Project Sunrise," Priya confirmed. "He knows what you're planning, the worker protections, the anonymous reporting system, all of it. He can't let it happen." "How did he find out?" Meera asked. Indira stepped forward, holding up a tiny electronic device. "Because of this, I found it under your desk, Bharav. He's been listening to everything." A heavy silence fell over the room. Bharav's plan had depended on controlling what information reached Vikram. Now they had to assume he knew everything. "Not everything," Priya said quietly. She opened her files, spreading photographs across the desk. "He doesn't know about these." The photos showed money changing hands, late-night meetings and documents being shredded, but most importantly, they showed the events leading up to Aaron's death, events that proved it was no accident. "How did you get these?" Meera's voice trembled as she looked at the evidence of her husband's murder. "I've been watching him for years," Priya replied. "At first, it was just a wife's suspicion. Then I started noticing patterns, discrepancies. I hired a private investigator, the same one who took these photos." "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" Bharav asked. Priya's face hardened. "Because I needed to be certain, and because I needed leverage. Vikram doesn't just have dirt on you, Bharav. He has information that could destroy dozens of powerful people. If I moved too soon, he would have burned everything down out of spite." A cry from the next room interrupted them. Dev had awakened. Meera moved to get him, but Bharav was already heading to the door. "I'll get him," he said softly. "Continue planning." In the nursery, Bharav lifted Dev gently, the baby's cries softening to whimpers. "You're safe," he murmured. "I promise you're safe." Looking down at Dev's innocent face, Bharav felt the weight of his responsibility more keenly than ever. This wasn't just about his company anymore. It was about justice for Aaron, security for Meera and Dev, and ensuring that no other families would suffer as they had. When he returned to the study with a now calm Dev, the atmosphere had shifted. Indira was setting up surveillance equipment, while Priya and Meera were deep in discussion over documents. "We have a problem," Indira announced. "The spy in your household staff, I know who it is. It's Maya, your new housekeeper." "The one who served tea to the security team that night," Meera realized. "Yes, but that's not the worst part. She has military training, and she's not just reporting to Vikram. She's been hired to ensure his plan succeeds, by any means necessary." Bharav instinctively stepped closer to Dev. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying she's not just a spy, she's a professional, and if Vikram gives the order—" "He wouldn't," Priya interrupted. "He's many things, but he's not a killer." "Tell that to Aaron," Meera said quietly. Priya's face fell. That was different. Aaron's death was meant to be a warning to others, not a planned murder. But now Vikram's desperate, and desperate men make dangerous choices. As if to punctuate her words, the lights in the mansion suddenly went out. Emergency generators kicked in seconds later, but the message was clear: they were under attack. Raj burst into the room. "Sir, we've lost external communications. Phone lines, internet, everything's down." He's isolating us, Indira said grimly. Classic tactic, cut off communication, create confusion, then strike. Bharav made a quick decision. Raj, get everyone to the panic room, now. But as they moved through the darkened hallways, Meera clutched Dev closer and whispered to Bharav, "This isn't right. It's too obvious." Bharav slowed his pace, thinking, "What do you mean? Maya's trained. She would be more subtle. This feels like a distraction," Bharav finished. His eyes widened in realization. "The office? While we're trapped here, Vikram has free access to everything in my office." "Not everything," Priya interjected. "He doesn't know about the safe room behind your library, the one where you keep your most sensitive files." Bharav turned to her in surprise. "How did you—" "I know my husband," she said simply. "I made it my business to know everything he might target." They changed direction, heading for the library instead of the panic room. Raj split the security team, sending half to protect the others while he accompanied Bharav. The library was dark and silent, but as they approached the hidden room they heard something that made them freeze, the soft sound of papers being moved. Someone had beaten them there. But who? Maya? Vikram himself? Or was there another player they hadn't considered? As Bharav reached for the hidden door panel, he felt Raj's hand on his arm, stopping him. The security chief pointed to a shadow moving under the door. Whoever was inside was about to come out. They pressed themselves against the walls, waiting. The hidden door began to slide open, and with it, the final piece of the puzzle was about to fall into place. The figure that stepped out was not who any of them expected. It wasn't Maya or Vikram, or any of his known associates. It was someone far more surprising, someone whose betrayal would change everything they thought they knew about their situation. And in the nursery upstairs, protected by the remaining security team, Meera held Dev close, unaware that the true threat had been right beside them all along. The figure that stepped out of the hidden room was Indira. In her hands were files from Bharav's most secure safe, and her face showed no surprise at being discovered. Instead, she looked almost relieved. "It's not what you think," she said quietly, before anyone could speak. "Then explain." Bharav's voice was cold. "Explain why my investigator is stealing from me." Indira carefully placed the files on a nearby table. "I'm not stealing anything. I'm protecting you. All of you. These files aren't what you think they are." "What do you mean?" Raj asked, his hand still near his weapon. "These files," Indira opened one carefully, "aren't just about Vikram's corruption. They're about something much bigger, something that involves your father, Bharav." Bharav felt as if the air had been sucked from the room. "My father? He's been gone for years." "Yes, but his decisions live on, including decisions about certain construction projects, worker safety protocols that were deliberately ignored, families that were paid to keep quiet." Indira's eyes were sympathetic but firm. "Sound familiar?" The implications hit Bharav like a physical blow. "You're saying—" "I'm saying Vikram didn't create this system. He inherited it from your father, who inherited it from his partners. It's been going on for generations." In the silence that followed, they heard footsteps approaching. Priya appeared in the doorway, slightly out of breath. "Maya's been detained," she announced. "But there's something else you need to know. Something about why I really started investigating Vikram." "You knew about this?" Bharav asked. "Not everything, but I knew enough to understand that my husband wasn't acting alone. He was following a pattern, one that was established long before any of us were involved." Indira nodded. "That's why I came here tonight. These files don't just implicate Vikram. They implicate dozens of powerful people, including some of your closest advisors, Bharav, people who've been maintaining this system for years. But why take them? Why not just tell me?" "Because I needed to verify something first. A suspicion I've had since Meera first came to me." Indira pulled out one particular document about Aaron's death. Upstairs, Meera was putting Dev down for the night when she heard a soft knock. It was one of the security team members. "Mom, Mr. Bharav asks that you join them in the library. They found something about your husband." Meera's heart began to race. She carefully settled Dev and followed the guard downstairs. In the library, the atmosphere was tense. Bharav looked as if he'd aged years in the past hour. He could barely meet her eyes as she entered. "Meera," Indira began gently, "we've found evidence about what really happened the night Arun died. It wasn't just an accident, or even just Vikram's doing, it was part of a larger pattern." "What do you mean?" "The electrical system Arun was working on, it wasn't just unsafe. It was deliberately sabotaged. Not to kill him specifically, but to ensure that eventually someone would have an accident. They needed a tragedy to justify certain insurance claims, certain policy changes." Meera felt her knees weaken. Bharav stepped forward to steady her, but she waved him away. "Who?" she demanded. "Who ordered this?" "A committee," Priya answered, "made up of senior executives, including my husband. They called it cost management, but really it was about maintaining control, creating fear." "The same committee your father served on time, Bharav," Indira added quietly. "Though I don't believe he ever knew about the deliberate accidents. That came later, after his time." Bharav sank into a chair, his face ashen. "All this time, I thought I was building something new. Something better. But I was just maintaining my father's system without realizing it." "No." Meera's voice was surprisingly strong. "You're breaking the system. That's why Vikram is so desperate to stop you. Project Sunrise isn't just about new safety protocols. It's about exposing and dismantling decades of corruption." "She's right," Priya agreed. "Why do you think I finally came forward? I saw in you something different." "Bharav." Her chance to end this cycle. Suddenly, Raj's radio crackled to life. "Sir, we have movement at the gates. Multiple vehicles approaching." Indira moved to the window. "Vikram's making his move. He must know we've found the files." "Let him come," Bharav said, standing. His voice had found new strength. "I'm done hiding from the truth. It's time to end this, all of it." "But the files," Priya protested. "If they become public, the scandal could destroy everything. Not just the company, but lives, families." "Then we don't make them public," Meera said suddenly. "We use them as leverage, to force change from within." Bharav looked at her with new respect. A chance for redemption rather than destruction. Exactly. These men followed a corrupt system because it was easy, because it was profitable. Give them a chance to be part of the solution instead. Outside, they could hear cars approaching. Vikram was minutes away, but now, instead of fear, there was determination in the room. They had the truth, all of it, and with it, the power to force real change. "Raj," Bharav commanded, "get everyone in position. It's time to welcome our guests." As they prepared for the confrontation to come, Meera touched Bharav's arm. "Are you ready for this? To face your father's legacy?" Bharav looked at her, then at the files that contained decades of secrets. "No," he admitted, "but I'm ready to build a new one." The sound of car doors slamming echoed through the night. The final confrontation was about to begin, but now the power dynamic had shifted. Vikram was coming to destroy them, but he didn't know that they held the key to destroying everything he'd built his power on. And upstairs, Dev slept peacefully, unaware that the world he would inherit was about to change forever. Vikram strode into the mansion like a man expecting victory. Behind him came 4 board members, their faces grim with purpose. What he didn't expect was to find Bharav calmly seated in his study, with Meera, Priya and Indira standing beside him. "You're looking well for someone having a breakdown," Vikram said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Amazing what clarity can do for one's health," Bharav replied evenly. He gestured to the seats arranged before his desk. "Please, all of you, sit. We have much to discuss." "The only thing to discuss is your resignation," one of the board members stated. "We've seen evidence of your erratic behavior, your questionable decisions." "You mean the behavior I wanted you to see?" Bharav interrupted. "The decisions I made knowing you were watching? Please, sit. You'll want to be sitting for what comes next." Something in his tone made them comply. Vikram remained standing until Priya caught his eye. The look she gave him made him slowly sink into a chair. "Before we begin," Bharav continued, "I want to tell you a story. It's about a young man who inherited a company from his father. He thought he was building something new, something better, but all along he was just maintaining an old system of corruption without realizing it. He opened a file on his desk, This system was created generations ago. It traded lives for profits, silence for power, and all of you, he looked at each board member in turn, have benefited from it. Careful, Bharav, Vikram warned. You're treading dangerous ground. No, Vikram. For the first time, I'm on solid ground. He began laying out documents. These files detail everything. Every payment, every cover-up, every accident that wasn't really an accident, including Aaron's death. The board members shifted uncomfortably. Vikram's face had gone pale. You can't prove, he began. But I can, Priya interrupted, stepping forward. I've been documenting everything, Vikram. Everything. Why? He whispered. Because someone had to. Because this has to end. Bharav stood, his presence filling the room. So here's what's going to happen. Project Sunrise goes forward. All of it. The safety protocols, the worker protections, the anonymous reporting system. But we're adding something new. A truth and reconciliation program. What does that mean? One of the board members asked. It means you have a choice. Help us implement these changes, acknowledge past wrongs and be part of the solution, or face the consequences when these files become public. You're blackmailing us. Vikram laughed harshly. No, Meera spoke for the first time. We're offering you redemption, the same kind of redemption I've watched Bharav earn over these past weeks. A heavy silence fell over the room. The board members looked at each other, decades of secrets weighing in the air between them. And if we refuse, someone finally asked, then these files go to the authorities. Indira stated simply, all of them, every detail. You'll destroy the company, Vikram protested. Thousands will lose their jobs. No, Bharav corrected. We'll rebuild it. Better, stronger, but this time built on truth instead of secrets. From upstairs came the sound of Dev crying. Meera moved to go, but Bharav touched her arm. Stay, he said softly. Raj will check on him. The simple gesture spoke volumes. Here was a man who had learned to care about more than just power and profits. The board members saw it too. The change in him was undeniable. One by one, they began to nod. Even Vikram, seeing his wife's unwavering stance beside Bharav, seemed to deflate. What do you need from us? The eldest board member asked. Everything, Bharav replied. Every document, every secret, every skeleton in every closet. We bring it all into the light, then we begin again. The next few hours were spent in intense discussion. Plans were made, documents were signed, commitments were given. By the time dawn began to paint the sky, a new path forward had been forged. As the board members filed out, Vikram lingered. He looked at his wife with pain in his eyes. Was any of it real? He asked her. Parts of it were, Priya answered softly. But not enough. He nodded, understanding what wasn't being said. Their marriage, like the company's success, had been built on shifting sands of deception. Neither could survive in the harsh light of truth. After everyone had gone, Bharav found Meera in the nursery, watching Dev sleep. What happens now? She asked without turning. Now we build something real, he replied, standing beside her. Something worthy of his future. She looked up at him, seeing the man who had risked everything to make things right. And us? What happens to us? Bharav gently touched Dev's small hand. That depends on you. I'm not offering charity anymore, Meera. I'm offering partnership in all things if you want it. Her answer was in her eyes, in the way she leaned against him, in the trust that had grown between them through all the darkness. In the days that followed, change swept through the company like a cleansing wind. Project Sunrise became Project Dawn, a complete restructuring that put workers' rights and safety at its heart. The Truth and Reconciliation Program, though painful, began to heal wounds decades old. Vikram and his closest allies resigned, but many board members chose to stay, working to rebuild what they had helped corrupt. Priya took charge of the Reconciliation Program, her understanding of both sides making her the perfect bridge between past and future. Indira's investigative agency was hired permanently, creating an independent oversight system that would help prevent future abuses. She and Raj worked together to rebuild the company's security from the ground up, ensuring transparency at every level. And in Bharav's mansion, now filled with the sound of Dev's laughter, a new kind of family took shape. Not one built on obligation or charity, but on choice, trust, and love. One evening, as they sat in the garden watching Dev play, Meera asked Bharav if he regretted anything about how things had unfolded. "Only that it took me so long to see the truth," he replied. "But then again, sometimes we need to be blind before we can truly learn to see." Dev toddled over to them, reaching for both their hands. In that simple gesture was everything they had fought for, a future built on truth, a legacy of justice, and the kind of love that transforms everything it touches. The company's old motto had been "Building Tomorrow." They changed it to "Building Truth," because in the end that was the greatest legacy they could leave, not just for Dev, but for all the children who would inherit the world they were creating. And so ended the story that began with a simple act of compassion on a rainy night. But perhaps it didn't end at all. Perhaps it was just the beginning of a new chapter, one written in the language of hope, truth, and the courage to change. The old system was gone, but something better had taken its place. Something built not on secrets and fear, but on transparency and trust. And in the end, that made all the difference. Thank you for watching this heart-stirring story. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like button, subscribe, and share it with your friends. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below telling me what you thought of the story. Also, click on the video appearing on your screen to continue the journey with us. See you in the next story.